So today we got some new information about an upcoming change, a redesign to Apple's MacBook keyboards. Apparently we're ditching butterfly. So this is already shaping up to be some good news. Let's talk about it. So this is the report from Mac Rumors that claims that Apple is going to use a new scissor switch keyboard in future MacBooks, starting with a 2019 MacBook Air refresh. Now, if you're a little bit surprised that the MacBook Air is going to start off this new transition, then you're not alone. I'm very surprised too, and we'll talk about the timing after we talk about what this actually is. So instead of continuing to refine the butterfly keyboard, Apple will instead have a new keyboard design based on scissor switches that'll have better key travel and durability than the butterfly keyboard. If true, that fixes literally the only two issues with the butterfly keyboard. The fact that they have very shallow key travel, and the fact that they get junked up with dust and break all the time. It's almost as though they didn't need to get rid of scissor switches because there was nothing wrong with them. So analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, who has been a very reliable source for years and years and years when it comes to Apple leaks and rumors, has said that these new keyboards will have a more durable design as well as a longer key travel, which means that the keyboard will be a little bit thicker than the butterfly keyboard. Now, we don't know whether this will reflect a redesign of the existing MacBook lineup. It's possible that because of this new thicker keyboard, the devices themselves will also get thicker. Now, this would not be a problem. In fact, I think that Apple computers are more than thin enough, so if it comes down to a few extra millimeters to give me more key travel and a more reliable keyboard, I will take that every day of the week. Now, something else that wasn't really mentioned in this report that adds a little bit of extra credibility is Ming-Chi Kuo says the new keyboard could improve the typing experience by offering longer key travel and durability by adopting glass fiber to reinforce the key's structure. Now that got my attention because if you remember, all the way back in February of this year, which when it comes to leaks and rumors is about 400 years ago, there was a rumor that most people laughed at that suggested that Apple was going to use glass in their new keyboards. Here it is. It was a patent that Apple filed for a glass keyboard that bends under your fingers. Now, this was definitely a bit of a stretch because the figures provided suggested that there would be no keycaps, and instead it would be a textured glass surface that bends, and it also suggested that the keycaps would, rather than being painted, be actual displays, individual small displays. Now, not only does that seem unlikely and impractical, but it also sounds extremely expensive. However, the glass element of the keyboard appears to have stuck around. This may have been early concept stages. Apple is known for filing patents quite a lot when they're working on a new design of something. And then as the process went on, and obviously I don't think they were ever actually planning on releasing a keyboard this year that doesn't have keycaps and instead has a bunch of little screens, but it could be a sign that this glass fiber has some credibility in terms of adding structural support to the keys themselves, which we all know is very, very necessary. Even the old scissor switch Apple keyboards, which no one really complained about, the keycaps themselves were a little bit fragile and the mechanism was prone to breaking. If you had to take off a keycap, there was a pretty decent chance that you were going to snap the little plastic scissor switches that were inside of those keys. So having a little bit more rigidity, durability is going to help not only in terms of durability, but also in terms of keyboard feel. That's where I think the butterfly keyboard does a good job. Granted, the key travel is too low and the reliability is crap, but what it does do well is provide a sense of tactility. It's very clicky, it's very tactile to press on, so it kind of makes up for the key travel in that respect. If you remember back to 2015 when the butterfly keyboard was introduced and sort of explained, the whole reason that Apple decided to switch away from the scissor switch was kind of twofold. One was, of course, the thickness. They wanted to get their keyboards very, very, very thin. And the second was precision. They had this demonstration back in April of 2015 that showed someone typing on a scissor switch MacBook keyboard, and you can see the keycaps wobble around, and they're not the most stable things in the world, whereas a butterfly key switch allows even presses on the corners or the edges of keys to be registered because the key is more flat and rigid. So I could definitely see why wanting to combine the benefits of both, the key travel and durability of a scissor switch with the tactility and stability of a butterfly switch, put those together and you've got yourself a really killer keyboard. Now let's talk about the thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The fact that this is apparently going to start with the MacBook Air this year. So that's a little weird. This was definitely not something that anyone really expected because, well, there's a few unknowns. If we're going to be implementing a new keyboard mechanism that is apparently going to be thicker than the butterfly switch, where is it going to fit? It says in the report that we're looking at a refresh, so not a complete design overhaul or even really any design overhaul, but if you're going to be putting a thicker keyboard inside of this MacBook Air, which is a pretty thin device, you're definitely going to have to make it thicker. You're definitely going to have to make some design choices. And that's a little bit strange considering that the MacBook Air was completely redesigned just last year, less than a year ago at this point. So it's a little bit weird, to say the least, that we would see this start with the MacBook Air. I could see this starting on the MacBook, because that was, of course, the computer that started the butterfly keyboard fiasco. So that makes sense. That computer has never been redesigned, and it hasn't even been updated in more than 2 years now, so that makes sense to me. But the MacBook Air is a weird place to start. Now, the other thing that's kind of taken me by surprise is that Ming-Chi Kuo says that the MacBook Pro will implement this new keyboard in 2020. So, what does that tell us about the 16-inch MacBook Pro that was apparently going to be coming out this year in September or October? In my previous video where I talked about that computer, I was sort of expressing confusion at the timing of all of this. We've got new Intel chips coming out early part of 2020, most likely to fit in these MacBook Pros. It's definitely a weird time to be updating, especially since the MacBook Pro has traditionally operated on a 4-year upgrade cycle between generations, but it has seemed more and more likely that we'll see a 16-inch MacBook Pro redesign this year. That's weird because Ming-Chi Kuo didn't say that this new keyboard would come to this 16-inch MacBook Pro. So are we now facing a situation, and this would be extremely odd, where we'll get a 16-inch MacBook Pro that features largely the same specs as the existing 2019 MacBook Pro. So 9th gen Intel, Vega graphics, DDR4, 32 gigs optional, sort of the same general functionality, but with a slightly altered design, thinner bezels, and that larger display. Could that be coming this year? And then next year, in 2020, we'll see a redesign across the board, 13, 15, and 16-inch, that would implement this new keyboard design and probably also a new MacBook Pro design. That's a weird way to do it. That does not make a whole lot of sense to me. I don't think it would make sense for Apple to launch a new tier MacBook Pro, a new computer this year, and then in under a year, in like a couple of months, do a different keyboard design that then wouldn't apply to that. Right now, we have this weird limbo where we're pretty sure we're going to get a 16-inch MacBook Pro this year. We're now pretty sure that we're going to get a new keyboard this year and next year, but we don't know how all of these things are going to interact and what the relationship is going to be between them. So, personally, I'm hoping that we'll get a new keyboard introduced alongside a new 16-inch MacBook Pro that will then get applied to the MacBook Air, which probably won't be redesigned but might be made a couple of millimeters thicker to accommodate a new keyboard. Then in 2020, probably in April, or I guess rather March, or in WWDC, we'll have the rest of the MacBook Pro range get updated with the new slim bezels, new design elements, and new keyboard. And then finally, we'll probably have a MacBook with ARM processors as well as a new design, probably sometime in 2020. That's seeming likely to me right now, but of course this stuff changes all the time. This is all speculation, so take it with a grain of salt, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. As usual, make sure to follow me on Twitter, @Miani. Don't forget to join my subreddit if you have any questions, comments, or thoughts on this new development in the world of the MacBook and what the hell is going on with it. And this has been a very long take, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And that's it for today's video, and I'll see you in the next one.